Welcome to Tulane Families. My name is Penny Wyatt. I'm the Director of Family Programs here at the university, and I'm so glad that you've joined us tonight for this Know Before They Go, which is a parent pre-departure orientation that's offered for you in this phase between when your student's been accepted to their program offered through the Newcomb-Tulane College Office of Study Abroad and when they will depart. So this is an important time for you to be supporting your student as they get ready for this fabulous experience. And so we've got my colleagues from that office to talk to you tonight. So I'm really excited to introduce you to our two panelists, Annie Gibson, who's the Director of Study Abroad within that office within Newcomb-Tulane College, and Katie Sebchek, who is a Study Abroad advisor on that staff. And so I will turn things over to them now and then join you again at the Q&A portion of the webinar.
Welcome, families. Again, I'm Annie. I'm the director of the Office of Study Abroad for Newcomb-Tulane College, and it's such a pleasure to be with you at this exciting time for your students as they're thinking about their journey for study abroad in the upcoming semester. So what we're going to do today is kind of a shortcut cheat sheet to our longer pre-departure orientation that by this time your student has already participated in. We do a day-long study abroad pre-departure orientation for students. They also have access to a Canvas pre-departure course where this information is laid out in great detail with more kind of details available to them as well. But today we're going to do kind of the cheat sheet of what your students should know and be thinking about at this time. So to get started, we'll go advance, Penny, to the next slide. You're at this juncture, the Office of Study Abroad, your student is verified to study abroad first through Tulane, and meaning that they've met all of their prerequisites in order to study abroad through Tulane. And then they also have what's called a secondary application. And so this would be an application to the host institution. If they're directly enrolling in an institution, it could be an application to a third-party provider. And at this juncture, in most cases, your student will have already applied to the secondary application as well, or should be getting close to finish, depending on the timeline for their program of completing and then being accepted into that secondary application. So there's a few programs in our portfolio that don't have that. So if your student is going to DIS in Copenhagen, for example, they do interviews. If they're going to Educo in France, they only have one application. But in general, your student should both be accepted to Tulane study abroad as well as be accepted to their host institution. Next slide. And as Penny mentioned, at Tulane, there are two offices of study abroad. And what we're talking about today is the Office of Study Abroad within Newcomb-Tulane College, which serves all students in all majors. And then there's the Freeman Office of Study Abroad, which is specifically for business majors and operates exchange programs. And there is some overlap there and between the two of them. The Office of Study Abroad does offer a limited number of programs where Freeman students can participate in our programs and also get courses that are pre-approved. So we'll talk just generally about the Office of Study Abroad, but that sort of orients you on the two offices that exist at Tulane. Next slide, Penny. So the first question often on the minds of families is how does tuition and billing work through when studying abroad through Tulane? Next slide. So this lays out that Tulane operates what's called a homeschool tuition model. And so what this means is that your student will continue to pay the tuition portion of their billing just as they do as if they were on campus. So the Tulane tuition as well as academic support fees at the general student rate are will be billed exactly as they normally are. What changes during study abroad is that housing, any meals abroad, and if there's supplemental international insurance, those would be paid directly to the program or the institution. So tuition, the homeschool tuition model, tuition is billed just as at Tulane, and then a separate bill that will come either from the program provider or from in some cases where if students are sourcing through a host institution, that payment for housing and meals comes separate. Next slide. Um, so the mechanism for this to happen is that the students are enrolled once they're accepted into study abroad and they commit that they will participate. They're enrolled in a 12 credit hour placeholder course at Tulane, and this allows the billing mechanism to move forward. They'll be billed through accounts receivable. And the great thing is that the disbursement of any sort of scholarships or financial aid happen automatically based on this placeholder course. So it's important to just make sure that your student is aware of how this billing works, and that they're not and just to note that any tuition bills, if for some reason they were to receive a tuition bill from their host institution, that is not for them to pay because Tulane will be paying the tuition on their behalf. And housing, the cost of housing is what is paid directly to the program, and or insurance if there's supplemental insurance. In some cases, a student's financial aid package may be able to be used for certain housing costs abroad. And so it's important that students make an appointment and speak with the financial aid counselor. And the financial aid advisors, there are advisors that are specifically experienced in working with students that are going through the study abroad process. So they should make an appointment and meet with them and talk about their questions and concerns. And note that they're listed on this webpage. There are a few programs, Educo in Paris, Reunidas in Madrid, and the BCSP program in Bologna are billed through Tulane. The housing is actually included, but in all the other cases, the student Tulane will pay tuition, and then the housing bill will go directly to the provider. It's also important to note that just as on campus at Tulane, in most cases with the Office of Study Abroad, independent housing is very unlikely. Most of our programs offer housing opportunities for students, and if housing is available through the program, then students are expected to stay in the program housing. So there is limited options for independent housing. It happens only in the case of living with a direct family member or relative, or for medical accommodation that cannot be met abroad that has already been filed with the Goldman Center. And so why do we choose the homeschool tuition model? It allows federal aid to still be applied, for scholarships to be retained. This ensures that all courses that are taken abroad automatically return for general elective credit. So any course that your student takes while abroad will receive Tulane credit. It also allows the mechanism for the health and safety and security protocols to go into place. So we'll talk soon about emergency response and kind of coverage, the international health insurance, et cetera, that students have access to through our programs. It also allows your students to access resources that are on campus while they are abroad. So if they want to engage with success coaching, tutoring, academic advising, et cetera, all of those services are available for them while studying abroad. And as your students are preparing for study abroad, we always like it when families are engaging in the discussion around academics and what does this experience look like. Of course, we're excited for the travel and the new experiences that they'll have, and we really want students to be prepared for different types of academic environments. So, some nuts and bolts of academics. When students study abroad, as I mentioned before, the courses are automatically going to come back as general elective credits. If a student is seeking major, minor, or core credit, those major, minor, and core credit are awarded through through the department. So some of these have been pre-approved. We have a list of courses on our website of courses that students have already taken that a department has already granted credit for, and those last for 3 years. So there are some courses that you may already see for major, minor, or core credit listed on a pre-approved list. But that is not a all-consuming list. There are so many course options that students can enroll in while abroad. So when a student takes the course, if they're coming back and they want credit, they will be working with their major department in general, or through their academic advisor when seeking core credit. Their grades are going to show up on their transcript. However, they will not be factored into the GPA. And this is done with the incentive for students to be able to feel like they can experiment and take some risks academically. So, for example, take a content course in a foreign language, or engage in a higher level content course in their major that they may not have that may have a kind of a different cultural context around academic learning. And at this time, your students are likely meeting with, they're getting a sense of what courses may be offered abroad. They're having some discussions about um, prospective courses. Certain majors like to have those discussions early. So the Freeman School of Business, for example, likes to speak with their students prior to going abroad about what courses they plan to take. They sign agreements about what courses those will be and update any changes along the way. And then we have other departments that only work with students once the student returns. So it varies kind of department by department how this works. But the main thing to remember is that all of these credits come as general elective credits, and then the student can understand from the major department or the minor department what their process is for approvals there. While studying abroad for academic reasons as well as for the maintenance of their visa status reasons, students are expected to stay fully enrolled in at least 12 credit hours while abroad. And those credit hours should be in-person classes, so not online classes, but in-person classes. Um, the same pass-fail, which is called SU at Tulane, applies while abroad, and a student must request an SU, what is the equivalent of about 2/3 of the way through a semester. So that's usually about 10 weeks. If you have a condensed semester on your program, we look at what that 2/3 of a semester would be. But in general, the same SU timeline applies. Again, they're automatically enrolled in this placeholder course. We ask at this time that students are starting to get a sense of their host institution. There may be particular courses or majors that require a higher GPA than what was required to study abroad. So we require a 2.5, for example, but there may be a certain course that they want to take at a host institution that might actually require a higher level of a GPA to enroll. So those are some of the conversations we're having with students now that may be accepted to study abroad. And now, as they're working through their secondary application and understanding what institution they're going to enroll in, that they are meeting the right language or the right GPA requirement for the courses that they hope to enroll in. And again, all of Tulane's academic and disciplinary policies do apply while abroad. Um, Coursework abroad. So there are different norms of coursework while abroad, and we really work with students in our pre-departure phase to understand that the way that you do life, the way you do academics in international settings can really vary. Our students have done a great job and a lot of learning in what it looks like to be in a classroom on the Tulane campus. And now it's a moment for them to really explore and see what it looks like to engage in higher level education, but in another cultural context. So it's a learning experience. At sometimes classroom norms and expectations may vary. They may find that there are fewer assignments. Maybe they only have a midterm and a final. They may find that they're in a cultural setting that has very lecture heavy classes, or they may find themselves in a setting that has a lot of teamwork. It may have a strict attendance policy. It may have a more lenient um, attendance policy. It may have less grade inflation than what we see in the US. So these are some of the things that we think about with students. At times, they may find, in fact, that some of the classes feel more challenging than Tulane. And we like to remind students that, it is an act of balancing as they're learning a new culture, a new location, wanting to explore, but yet their main goal and challenge is their academics while abroad. So balancing the self-management, learning these new skills of independence and how to travel for the first time and how to book plane tickets and that are how to do public transportation for the first time. Some of these skills are some of the most formative of for students that choose to study abroad, and it's happening at the same time that they're holding down the expectations of the classroom. The also to prepare themselves for the return, it's important that they keep all of their syllabi and coursework with them. So at times they may get a syllabus. They may be in a cultural setting that a syllabus isn't as common to see. But the academic department at Tulane will want to evaluate the work to decide if they're seeking major or minor credit for a particular course. And if a syllabi is not available, that's often determined based on the reading list of the course, based on the assignments that have been turned in. So keeping all that work is very, very important. So, travel logistics. So, at this time, you all are likely thinking through with your student how they're going to prepare for their upcoming travels in the fall semester, booking tickets, thinking about visas, etc. So, a few things of note. Next slide. First is that when studying abroad on Tulane related activities, such as study abroad, students are required to book through Tulane's travel provider called World Travel Services. And your student has heard about this in many different places. They get it in our pre-departure orientation. They receive this information in their acceptance letter. They receive this information online. But it's important that they know that they should be booking through Tulane's travel provider and not just finding a ticket on Travelocity or Student Universe. They must book through Tulane's travel services. And they can do that through a web portal called Concur. They can also do that by writing directly to the travel agents, and they received again the information on how to do this in those different places. When booking with Tulane, non-refundable fares are blocked and as well as many budget airlines. So that we're looking at economy flights. The benefit to this is that in the case of any emergency, Tulane is able to help and support the student in tickets changes on site in case of emergencies or needed evacuation. It's rare that students there is a possibility of getting it's rare, but the travel department at Tulane at times will allow for an exception to this travel policy for students that are booking flights with miles. Um, if it is the case that a student is using miles to book, and so they're booking directly rather, or they would like to book directly rather than use the travel surge service, they must complete a petition. They email Tulane Travel Management. The email is there, travel at tulane.edu, and explain their reasoning for why they would like an exception. And if um, that exception is granted, they're sent then the information on how to manually enroll in the in our health insurance as well as our evacuation insurance, because that is usually automatically enrolled in through the booking service. And so if they're not booking centrally, it's important that they do the petition process so that we can enroll them in the mandatory evacuation, health insurance, crisis management insurance, et cetera. So that's booking a flight. The next thing to keep in mind are your documents necessary for travel. Your passport, the passport of your student must be valid for at least 6 months after the date of their study abroad program ending. So it's important that your student is checking the expiration date on the passport and thinking ahead that it is valid for another 6 months post their return. And now is the time to renew if they're going to renew. And I always recommend the expedited service, especially if you're now looking also to applying for a visa, because there are kind of delays on these things, and the faster turnaround, the better. Applying for a visa is a really varying experience. And the part of the process that's the largest learning curve in logistics for the student to navigate, and it really runs the gamut on what that process can look like. We have certain programs that don't require a visa. The country of entry may not require a visa, or the limit of time and program is under the 90-day limit that allows the student to travel without a visa. However, if applying for a visa, it's important that the student carefully look at the visa requirements that they must follow. And this varies, like as I said, by the host country. It varies by the citizenship of the student. And then it also varies by the consulate location. And that's really important to note. So, for example, if you're applying to a visa in Spain and you're applying to the consulate in California, or you're applying to the consulate in Houston, what is required for the visa is different. So we have cases where a student will say, "Oh, I'm just filling it out just like my friend," but one friend is applying to Houston and one is applying to California, and one will get denied because they're not following the requirements of the local consulate. So often, and you are allowed to either apply through your permanent home residence, or through Tulane's home residence. So in this case, the Houston consulate. Um, if we can go back, just one other thing about the visa that I'd like to mention is that it's also important to think about your summer travel schedule, that sometimes there can be a conflict with visa appointment times, because you will likely, in many cases, you'll have to send your passport in order to get your visa. So making sure that you keep that in mind, the amount of time in mind. Okay, next slide. Health and safety abroad. So, as I mentioned, your student, we can go to the next slide, they will be enrolled in something called Crisis 24. And this is a emergency assistance program for students. So it would activate in the case of a major emergency evacuation need. However, it also offers some health support along the way. So, for example, if a student is experiencing a mental health crisis and needs to be connected with an English speaking therapist, Crisis 24 can help facilitate that. If a student needs to be connected to a medical provider in country, Crisis 24 can help facilitate that. So students will be enrolled. They'll download. They're directed during their pre-departure session to download the app so that they know how to use it. It also gives safety briefings for different cities, for different neighborhoods, et cetera, so that students have this information. We also recommend they enroll in the travel.state.gov to get information about their location and enroll in the STEP program, the Smart Travel Enrollment Program through the U.S. Department of State, which will also give briefings on health and safety and will also notify the State Department of the location of U.S. citizens in the case of any crisis happening abroad. And right now is a great time for the students to start thinking about what is their health and safety on-site support plan, researching local conditions that might impact health, whether that's air quality, whether that's dehydration, whether that's whatever the case may be. What are the things that may impact their health abroad? If there are any sort of health-related accommodations, those should be sent to the Office of Study Abroad as well as to their program. And we always ask that students request these things earlier. At times, students will say, "Oh, I don't think I need it," and then get on site and really need it. And it's much harder to do once abroad. It's better to put it in place prior to arrival. And then just coming up with a plan for how to stay connected with healthcare providers, any sort of kind of continuing care plan with therapists or any specialists that your child might be seeing. And finally, medications, traveling borders. Medications should always be taken in the carry-on. Medications should travel in their original labeled bottle. And certain medications may not be allowed to travel internationally or across certain borders. So it's always good to take a look to make sure that what medications that you're traveling with are legal to enter the country where the student will be studying abroad. And the students will be enrolled in insurance while abroad. They're also enrolled in an insurance automatically at Tulane. It's called Chubb insurance. So I see there's actually what Geo Blue on this slide is actually an old code. So we'll be sure to update this before we send out the slide deck to you. The insurance that all Tulane students have is called Chubb. And the programs that they're enrolled in may also have another supplemental insurance as well. So there may be two. Um, and then just the final reminder, each semester your student gets a health waiver form that's mailed to them. And they should complete that annual health insurance waiver form just as they always do. So if they enroll in their domestic, the same way that because students need to be covered domestically in case of major emergency, however you are currently handling insurance at Tulane, you should do that even during your semester abroad. Okay, life abroad. The fun part of supporting your students, kind of thinking about their time abroad. So the first thing to note is that the experience of study abroad is exciting, and your student will also go through what we like to talk about as culture shock. There's going to be some ups and downs. Your student arrives, they're excited, there's all these new things happening, they want to go out, they want to see the sights. And then there's this moment where something happens. They have a bad day, a bad interaction, a difficult moment in class. or they get physically sick because they've been pushing themselves to the limits, and they start to hit this low. And it's sort of this up and down period that happens throughout the course of their time. And I think it's important to mention that to you all as family members as well, because you're also likely the ones that get the call when they're at the shock, when they're at the bottom. And I'll often get calls from parents that their student reached out and is just having a horrible time and don't know how they can go on for the full semester. And so we do a wellness check-in, and then the student says to us, "Oh, it was just a bad day." So I think you often get kind of some of the lows of the culture shock stage. And so what you can do to support that is to really encourage what we talk about in our advising team as the growth mindset. So when they're sort of feeling like I can't do this, or I don't know how to, order food and check, just reminding them you can't do this yet, but you're learning. This is a process that you will get better with over time. Um, or I can't keep up in the class, or you can't keep up yet, but just helping them change that language of frustration to language of learning, and helping them continue to see the benefits of what they're going through. Housing abroad. The other thing that often causes this moment of culture shock is students that are navigating different living realities. What where students will be housed abroad will be as parallel as possible what a student living situation would look like in a host country. And that really varies country to country. The other thing to note is that in most cases where our students are living is um, it's comparable, but it's often even much better than what local students would be living in. But all of the housing where we have students meet Tulane safety standards, um, and also that just to keep in mind that housing can vary a lot by location. It can vary a lot by cities. We have students that are really excited to study abroad, that often choose some of the major cities in the world, and the normal commute time in for students in these major cities um, will be likely over 30 minutes, and in most cases between 45 minutes and an hour for commute time from their housing to their classes. And that's quite a normal commute time. And so that is a way for it. So helping them reframe that of learning about how to handle public transportation, what it's like to live in a large city, and helping set those norms where they're getting to know about what neighborhoods are like, where people live. It may not be, while living in Madrid's centro might be what is on their mind, coming from a kind of a tourist experience. That's not where families live. That's not where students live. And so as a study abroad experience, they're getting that experience of living more of a day-to-day life. We always talk to our students about not comparing housing from one place to another. Just like at Tulane there, we have really varied experiences in the dorm. A homestay is not going to be identical to an apartment. An apartment in one building to another may vary. There are certain standards across all, but this really does vary. If there's a problem with housing, the first point of contact will be their program provider, or the housing provider for their program. And we always say to try not to make big decisions in the first few weeks, because that is that major culture shock time where you're trying to get your bearings, you're trying to get your surroundings, you're getting used to the locations, and so it often takes a little adjustment. And again, independent housing or living, getting an apartment or an Airbnb with friends is not allowed in most cases. We have very few programs that do not offer the ability to be housed through the program. And this is a photo so on the left here, this is an example of the dorms pulled from the Tulane HRL website. The photo in the middle is pulled from the Tulane classifieds off-campus housing at Tulane. And then the photo on the right is pulled from an Airbnb in the uptown Tulane area. So just to show you the range of housing that you see at Tulane, we don't expect that Tulane students living in New Orleans are staying in an Airbnb setting like this on the right. And when studying abroad as well, it's important to sort of set students' expectations that they will be living in wonderful housing, and they are not staying in Airbnbs for the semester. Accommodations. So make sure that you have filed, that your student has filed any sort of medically needed accommodation through the Goldman Center. And once filed, those can be sent to us. And as best we can, we work with on-site programs to meet the needs and the requests in those documented cases of a medical need. Again, for independent housing, to live outside of program-related housing, if there is a medical accommodation that cannot be met through a program provider, then that would be one of the options for living in independent housing. But the number of cases that I have seen approved for that are quite limited. Next slide. Making friends abroad. So this is also this pre moment of thinking about study abroad is also can bring some both excitement and anxiety. You know, will I make friends? How will it what will life be like while I'm there? And a complaint that we do not hear is that are alone. So sometimes students will say, "Oh, I don't know anyone on my program." That is going to change. In general, students make some of their best lifetime friends on those programs. They may be from Tulane, they may be from other US-based universities that are on their program, they may be local friends. And we really just like to encourage students to step out of their bubbles and really think about that transition, remind them of their freshman year. They've met so many new people and they have so many new friends now. That same thing is going to happen while abroad. They're going to be building a global network. So we really try to help students ease those anxieties. And if you do see that your student is struggling with those anxieties of what that kind of cultural transition will be like, our study abroad advisors meet with students often to engage in these conversations and get some strategies to think through it. If your student is a first-time airport traveler, we also have some resources available to learn about how to navigate an airport for the first time. And just in general, it's always helpful to meet with your students, sort of walk them through how they're getting from the airport to their program. What would they do if their phone goes dead and that sort of thing to save their address in a place other than just their phone, making sure that they're packing essentials, not in their checked luggage. So, but we are also meeting with students regularly that may not be seasoned travelers that want to talk about, just prepping for the experience of traveling for a semester. We have discussions with students about independent travel. What does that look like? You know, if you, what would it look like if every weekend at Tulane you traveled to a new city? You'd learn about other cities, but it would impact your experience of friendships that you make here on campus at Tulane. It would impact your ability to get to know New Orleans, and that will happen similarly abroad. So students are going to have to make some decisions about how much they get to know their local city, the amount of time and energy they devote to their friends. There's an environmental impact to traveling. We talk about that as well with our students here, to think about what is the sort of the price of in terms of sustainability for each of these weekend travels. And the other thing to note is to make sure when booking flights that you're taking into account the start and end dates, including the finals of your semester. It is very unlikely that host institutions would be willing to allow early exams. So making sure that students are staying in their program through the deadline of the last final. And then we offer resources for students navigating different identities abroad, and are happy to help talk through that. And we also talk with them about staying connected, about options for buying local SIM cards, how to navigate your phone plans internationally, how much money should you bring based on your host country, helping them think through budgeting and options for making budgets, what type of what feeding yourself will look like. So if for students on a budget, that homestays tend to be the cheapest option because you usually have at least two, sometimes three meals included in the price of your housing, which in many cases is cheaper than what you can get as an apartment. But there's also options for thinking about for cooking or rather than going out. So we talk with students about all of those things in this pre-departure stage. And then finally, in this life abroad section, we'll go to the next slide. Um, we strikes and things like that. We talk about that when to not be engaged in labor action strikes, or what happens if their classes are impacted by a strike. We encourage them not to attend demonstrations, that they should check in with their on-site staff to understand any sort of events that are happening in cities that may change transport flow or public transportation and that sort of thing. And finally, encourage your student not to overpack. If your student has any sort of service or emotional support animals, they should be speaking with both our office as well as the host program ASAP. At times, if students are traveling with animals, they'll need additional vaccinations. And then just having a check-in with your student about how you will engage. Will they be engaging with social media? We want to follow those stories, and we want them to engage in the experience locally, and what's the best way to do that. So I will end it there, and we have about 15, 20 minutes or so for some questions.
Okay, so family members, this is when we encourage you to type those questions in, and we'll try to get to those as many of those as possible. Um, so one question is about just that discrepancy that there might exist between what Tulane costs for the semester versus what, say, directly enrolling in the school might be. And so if you could, Annie, just explain again sort of what the rationale is behind all of the benefits that they have for still being enrolled at Tulane when they're abroad.
Yep. So the homeschool tuition model allows students to know that all of their coursework is going to transfer. It allows access to our office, to all all programs across Tulane and centers across Tulane. So tutoring success, library services, you're enrolled as a full-time student. So any sorts of scholarships that you have, need-based or federal or merit scholarships, would all apply. I do realize that there are families that um, even with those benefits, they would prefer to pay the program directly. We do this. There is an option for students to take a leave of absence for the semester and pay and pay the program directly, and then transfer credits back. That can happen on any programs except for CIEE programs, because CIEE programs are transcripted by Tulane. Tulane is the university that issues the academic transcript for all CIEE. But for other programs, students are, and they do have the option to think about or consider the leave of absence. And in case by case, we work with students on those.
Okay, another question is their break schedule consistent with Tulane's? For example, do they get the week of Thanksgiving off?
Their break schedules are not consistent with Tulane's. They would, it'll vary program by program, whether there's a fall break or something that coincides with Thanksgiving, but no, each program will follow an academic calendar of the host institution. So some programs may start in July, some programs may start in September, some may go all the way up until, June 21st. Some of them will, sorry, December 21st. Some of them will end in early December. So you just have to look program by program.
The next question is, can they get their classes confirmed for major or minor credit before they leave so they know how those courses will count?
This varies department by department. There are certain departments that are willing to pre-approve a course. The majority of departments are not, unfortunately. The majority of departments will give like a kind of a conditional approval or say, this seems like a course that we would approve, but they wait to see the syllabi and the coursework on the back end to actually to give the 100% major or minor approval. And it is department by department. So we instruct the students to meet with their major departments to have those conversations. The other things are that oftentimes students may not know what courses they're 100% going to take until they arrive on site. In the case of students that are enrolling in an institution, a host institution internationally, like some of those courses may not be even available online yet for the pre-approval. In the US, we do list courses way sooner and have it available and visible for students way sooner than often in other cultural contexts. So that is why there's often this discrepancy.
How is housing and health insurance going to be billed by the program? I assume that they will come separately from the Tulane tuition.
Exactly. They will receive a bill directly to the student by the address that the student lists as their billing address.
And is that like a mailing address,
It's
Annie?
usually a mailing address. At times they may both get a mailing address as well as a like an email link to a portal. But in
Okay.
general, they'll be mailed a housing bill. And sometimes it happens through a portal. So, for example, CIEE, many of the third-party providers will do it through an online portal. So it varies program to program as well.
Okay. This next question is kind of complicated. Do you have any suggestions or tips for students who are struggling to get an appointment to begin the process of applying for a visa? This parent's daughter's been trying for 3 weeks to book an appointment for a visa through the Italian consulate. She tried for 3 weeks with the Los Angeles consulate because that's her hometown, was unsuccessful, no appointments available. Then learned she could mail in the visa application to the Houston consulate because Houston consulate is in the region for Tulane. Um,
Mm.
so she said she's been trying for every day for 2 weeks to book an appointment, and there haven't been appointments available. So do you have any
Yeah.
advice for somebody navigating that situation?
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is a really common issue right now for students seeking Italian student visas, not just Tulane, just any student seeking Italian visas right now. This is very common. The both the Italian and Spanish and French visa process are notoriously constrained, and others are experiencing exactly what your daughter is experiencing. So tips. So timing matters. I would suggest to try as close to midnight in Rome as possible. That's one suggestion. So wherever you are, whatever, try to go as close to midnight in Rome and try logging in then, because that's often a reset for opening new spots. Another try is to try it early morning. So, like 7 or 8, like 7 to 9 a.m. in the local time for the consulate that you're applying in. Sometimes that can help. Um, the other thing that I've heard students say is that multiple refresh like in the same 15 20 minutes, just kind of refreshing the page at sometimes slots can appear. I know this sounds frustrating and crazy hearing me say it. And unfortunately, that is part of the bureaucracies of getting a visa. And then the other, you are doing the right thing. You're trying two different consulates, just being very sure that you're following the guidelines of whichever consulate you're applying to.
So the next question is, so does the student go ahead and start the visa application? Do they need any documentation for that process? And I'm assuming that means documentation from Tulane,
It
included their visa.
And a lot of times they do need documentation from Tulane. We provide visa letters upon request, and students are given the information about how to request this at the pre-departure orientation. There's a form within their Canvas course that also goes directly to the link for them to request a visa letter. So they do have information on how to request a visa letter if that's needed. Sometimes visa applications will request bank statements, other types of, and sometimes these have to be notarized. So each consulate, each visa application is slightly different. We instruct students to manage that, to follow the guidelines of the consulate. We don't provide direct guidance beyond what I'm kind of explaining now, as helping students think through these general things to talk about, and advisors do, meet with students to talk about visas and talk about these things generally, help them pull up the website of the consulate and things like that. But we're not really advising directly, because what we need them to learn to kind of work directly with the consulate.
And I'll just clarify for any parents who might not have understood, their Canvas is the university's online course management program. So Study Abroad has set up um, learning modules and documents and resources as if it were a course. So students have access to it in the same portal that they use for all their courses and stuff. So they've set this up so it's really organized. It's easy for students to access, and they can, access that from anywhere they're using the web. The next question is, can you use money from a 529 savings plan to pay for the housing and food costs during study abroad?
Oh, that one may be a little outside of my expertise. I think whoever would be the best person to advise you on what you can use your 529 account for. I would assume that if you can use it for those things on campus, you could use it for those things during study abroad, but that would be a question to ask whoever helps you make decisions on your 529.
And Annie, do you think that's like that our accounts receivable office might be able to answer that, um, or more of like the whatever institution they did their savings plan through?
um I think you could probably do both. Whoever you did your savings plan through, I would check to see what sorts of things can your 529 account can cover. If they say that housing and food during during my child's education could be used, then it seems like this fits that. So I would also then just check in with accounts receivable to see if they have, if that is someone that you can consult with a 529. I've never dealt with a 529 myself,
Okay.
so I'm not sure.
Okay. Um, Next question. You mentioned that staying in a host country, you mentioned that some students might be staying in host country through exam time. In Spain, at the University of Seville, exams are in January, and Tulane will likely have started spring semester by then. I've been told that often there are internationally friendly courses that will offer a December exam. It seems tough to stay 3 or 4 weeks beyond the program, pay for housing, miss winter break, etc.
Yes, correct. So the programs that they're in through the Office of Study Abroad, there are none that go. There's an option to take there is, as you say, as you explain, usually for international students, a December option for exams, and that date will be published. So while the courses in Spain or in Sevilla might go until January, for the courses our study abroad students will be enrolled in, there'll be an exam date that is prior to Christmas, where and there are a few cases depending on what course your students take. So I can't say that 100%, but in general, they will have exams prior to Christmas. There are a few cases where, and this is the student knows it up front that they would be staying for exams, that they would stay up through January. I've never had a student that has had to take an exam and then arrive late to the spring semester for Tulane, for example.
Okay, we have several questions, um, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to try to get to as many of these as possible and might consolidate a few and just say that if we don't get to your question this evening, then you can email osa@tulane.edu. You'll see that email address there on the screen. Um, and a few of these are along the lines of, how do I find this out? I've not gotten any information directly about this. Does all of that information go to the student? And so that is something that is is definitely something to understand, that the student does need to take on more of that responsibility for reading and reviewing all the information that's coming to them from the Office of Study Abroad and checking into the resources and information that are in that Canvas course and sharing that with you. So I do think that Annie would agree that most of that information, it's going to go directly to the student. And so while you may have felt like when they were applying to Tulane, you received more information directly for that season while they were still in high school, at this point, the information is going to go directly to the student. Would that be correct, Annie?
That's correct. Yes.
So, in terms of like finding out the program schedule for the other program, looking at, where the information is about a petition to use miles and all of that, that goes directly to the student. It's something that the student can access. And so we hope that having this information from the webinar will give you sort of those talking points where you can connect with your student and kind of say, okay, I understand you've got all this information that you've been provided in your pre-departure orientation information. You've got resources available. I learned some things. Let's sit down and kind of go through point by point, make sure we kind of get all the ducks in a row. So we hope that this background kind of helps inform how you'll connect with your student to help support them, but understand that it is being provided to them to be the manager of that process. And that's one of the big growth opportunities that comes with this whole study abroad experience too. So I'll try to do a couple more questions. Um, let's see. Is there additional financial aid for going abroad in addition to regular aid? That would be something the student needs to reach out to the Office of University Financial Aid about. Um, somebody said that they've been told that many consulates have walk-in opportunities. So it might be that if your student is traveling back home to your home city, if that is a place where there is a consulate, then that may be a strategy to employ. Do you think, Annie? Um,
Yep, you really have to look consulate by consulate. And so I recommend it's a lot of times students crowdsource it, or and parents, it's natural that we crowdsource information on how to do the process. And it really, consulates really vary location by location based on the residence from which you're applying. So it's just really important that you all with your student do the research from the address where you're applying for the visa, because you may have walk-ins in one location, or you may have to go in person in one location. You may be able to mail in another location, and it might be for the same country, but the consulate details are quite different.
Okay, I think I'm going to try to do two more questions and we can do these quickly. Um, is it possible that their students will get a list of the other Tulane students who are studying abroad in the same city at the same time?
If your student would, in the Canvas course, that module that we talked about that they have online, students are they can if they want to be connected, there's a module that allows them to put their information so that they're able to connect. So there's a way that students are able to self do that through the Canvas module. They say, yes, I'm going to Rabat. I'd like to be connected with other students going to Rabat, and they're doing it in that portal, and then other students can respond. If they're not getting any traction, they need some more help, they can reach out to a study abroad advisor who can then connect them by whatever, sharing that information with other students, and other students can then decide if they want to reach out.
So I think this will be our last question. This person's daughter shared that she had been doing an online pre-departure quote unquote class, but must have missed seeing the information about an in-person orientation. Were those in person? I would think if there were, they've been wrapped up for the semester. Is that true, Annie?
Yes, it's been wrapped up for the semester. So now the option is to complete the online orientation, and the resources remain with them throughout their time abroad. The resources for the online. Everyone's enrolled in the online orientation if they went to in person or not.
Okay. And
And I'll just say our advisors are still around. We're meeting with students regularly. We also have walk-in advising regularly. So even though the official pre-departure isn't happening, if your student has not yet connected with the Office of Study Abroad, I highly encourage them to connect. There's a lot of opportunities to make a one-on-one appointment or to go to a walk-in advising still, but before they leave campus.
okay. And just to remind all the parents, tomorrow is the last day of class. And then the study period starts after that, and finals will start up, I think on Monday. So there is a lot of sort of wrapping up at this point in time, but people are still available to talk with your students. They can still email. And contrary to what students believe, sometimes they think that when they go home, all of us do as well. But we're still working through the summer. So anyway, we would encourage them to continue to reach out to these resource people that they have. Um, Annie, do you have any last comments that you want to make before we close for the evening?
No, thanks for being here and engaging, and do encourage your students to connect if they're feeling like they need some more orientation or direction, because we are here to provide that.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Again, this information will be archived at families.tulane.edu. Just look for the tab for communications and webinars, and it will be there. And we appreciate your interest in this, and we wish your student a really interesting, engaging, growth-producing study abroad experience. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.